of 10 helps to displace.
You know, I will finish and let it go, but art is subjective, isn't it?
Can I interrupt there, actually? I think actually that he's got a very, very good point here, because I don't think you're driving anything political necessarily.
No.
It's a question of the makeup. For example, you know, Aircon Air Shower used to be on it, at least I know, because I vaguely knew him at one point. Is he still on it?
He has been. I don't have the list in front of me here. So
In which case he's been on it for a long time. I think the idea of having just two terms is a very good one. But what it is, it's about actually what the kind of art that goes up, you know, for better or worse. And I think there is something really in that. I mean, if you're all kind of conceptual artist enthusiasts, that can make a difference to what goes up. Because I know that the public are presented with maquettes, aren't they?
Yeah, indeed.
But the funny thing about it, strikes me, is that you know, if you look in Trafalgar Square at the others, some of those were put up by public sort of subscription from ordinary members of the public. We're in actually a supposedly more democratic time, and yet these things are decided and then put in front of the public.
The shortlist is effectively selected and then put
Yes.
in front of the public, of
Yes.
course. And then the public do vote and respond to the public shortlist as well. And there's a huge amount of interest. Tens of thousands of people who are interested and do come and engage with the shortlist exhibition, so it's very well received and very well attended.
It might be worth. I mean, I can't speak about culture and arts, but in any sense whatsoever. But the if you knew anything about me, but unless you count chess as something cultural, but we have lots of advisory boards here, and you know, ultimately, of course, the mayor of the day is accountable because the mayor ultimately chooses the people on those advisory boards, and they are accountable. The vast majority of them are unpaid, but we do ask all of them, and it would be true in this case as well, all of them to declare their interest on the website. Now, you may personally think I wouldn't have chosen those 10 people, but the mayor is accountable for that. But at least we do ask them to, if they've got direct interests or related interests, to declare that publicly, and they are displayed on our website. So from a kind of pure governance point of view, without leaving the content, subject matter to one side, there is that check and balance. But you may disagree on creative grounds. That's something different.
Absolutely, although without wishing to make it, I think that, Keith raised an interesting point, that we're not talking about politics particularly, but it is, if you like, certainly a consensus can already be there in terms of what is worthy. So, for, whether you want a traditional figurative sort of expert and a conceptual expert, that's all I'm thinking of.
And I think the terms of reference at the moment, the original terms of reference are quite limited, and I think certainly we would want to expand them and take on board your recommendations around terms, absolutely, and look at clearly defining the different aspects that group has to deliver. They're not just advising on the kind of quality of art on there, but also how to make that a sustainable programme. So we need a number of expert opinions on that, and I think clarifying that kind of job description for that panel will be very useful in terms of reference review.
Thank you.
Are you happy with that?
Yeah.
Stop anything?
No.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting because it's kind of gone off a bit, I feel, in the sense that there's not so much talking about it, but at one stage there was a huge amount of talking about the fourth plinth and public interest. It seems to have died out. Okay. Could we go on then, David, to the review of an agency consultant? Oh, I'm sorry, are you going, Sean?
Yes.
You're going?
She's finished she hasn't got any other papers.
Great, of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you very much. Thank you. Can we move on to number 2 then, David?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, yes, this is the review of agency and consultancy staff and employment status. This is a review looking at the revised intermediaries legislation, which is termed IR 35. Again, this we found to be a well-managed area. We identified one recommendation, so overall we concluded that the process and the system currently in place is adequate. The recommendation refers to training in particular with procurement managers to ensure that appropriate support is given to them when identifying contracts that need to be let for employers. But again, the process with this legislation within the GLA is predominantly well managed.
Chair, can I just say two quick things before we come in? First of all, obviously introduce formally Charmaine Sousa, the AD for HR and OD, and welcome to her. And the second thing is, I think it'd be fair to say, and David, correct me if I've got this one wrong, this was very, very close to being substantial and is on the cusp of the two markings. I just thought I'd say that, just to give Charmaine a good introduction to the
Right, okay.
So, because you can see there aren't a huge number of recommendations. So.
Exactly, yeah. And this is when we get to the nuance of the priority rating, because it's priority 2, we looked at adequate. But obviously, when we come to do our follow-up, and this is the target date for December, I fully expect, and I have no reason to doubt that this will be a substantial rating in our follow-up. So. But yes, as Tom's quite rightly pointed out, this was very close, to receiving substantial.
Do you have no voice?
No.
When when you're going from something, because obviously the terms you give, adequate, substantial, whatever, seem the least nuanced of all things. You know, how does one actually? What actually could make something go?
Having just discussed art and the subjectivity of art, it's in some ways it's a little bit like that. We would look at the wholes. Obviously, if you for the rating of this to receive adequate, when you're looking at a training recommendation, you are looking at a large scale, potentially large scale program to be rolled out. So to actually implement that might take some time. So until you've completed that we'd be looking at that there's a potential weakness there with people not understanding the relevant legislation in this particular case. So we take into a number of factors when we're giving those ratings, but ultimately we can have discussions about, as Tom's quite rightly said, should it be substantial, should it be adequate. What we normally would expect is with the follow-up we'd be looking at to be fully implemented and looking at substantial for the follow-up. So that's the key one really is the follow-up review.
We don't have any particular questions. Is there anything you'd like to add at all, actually, Charmaine?
No, I think the main point is that it's running this week, the first training session Thursday, and we're piloting it. What will be key for us in HR is to make sure that the content, working with finance colleagues, procurement colleagues, is fit for purpose, taking some feedback from that. You'll see that that it will then run every 4 to 6 weeks through 2018. I think crucially to me, this audit predates my joining the GLA, and in doing some of my homework, the reference we use is procurement managers, but actually those are managers right through the business who happen to do procurement. We don't have a specialist team of procurement managers. So what's important is to make sure that we've got enough people trained to bring up the level of understanding of IR35 and the implications of what that means for procurement practice particularly. I feel confident on the temporary workers. We're in a good place, as David has mentioned, so it really is procurement that we want to focus on.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us as well.
There's actually a follow-up for Charmaine as well. Follow-up report. Not a follow-up question, Chair. A follow-up report. You can't escape quite yet.
Thank you, but I'm staying for the
Right. Okay. Next we have the Oversight and Governance, the LDC. David, I know we've got a few points.
Okay, yeah, thank you again, Chair. So yes, as you've quite rightly stated, this is a review of the GLA Oversight and Governance of the LLDC. This was, when we were putting together last year's plan, it was the top risk to the GLA. So it was looking how the GLA were looking at the LLDC and the governance that they've got in place to ensure delivery and oversight of the LLDC. We found that, interestingly enough, when you're talking about this, we received an adequate rating with 6 recommendations, but if you look at the recommendations, a lot of those were falling into priority 3, in fact, and one was a priority 4, whereas previously that we talked about a priority 2. We've got target dates for those between sort of January and April and ongoing with the priority 3, but generally it's a well governed area, but there are, as I say, 6 recommendations which have been accepted to tighten things really over the LLDC, and I know Martin's here too.
Martin, yes, okay. We have Keith, you had a point on that, didn't you?
Yeah, sure. Page 57, if it helps. Under key risk issues, I believe it is being dealt with, and that's the reference to the mechanism through which the GLA apply a degree of scrutiny and accountability in the LDC Act. And that apparently is standalone, and there's the opportunity to bring it within the overall corporate framework, which I believe is one of the recommendations actually that is made, if I've got it right, on page 60. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we would want to see that happen. So that's good. Then on page 61, there's the, just make sure I cover it, yeah, page 61. The recommendation, consideration be given to maintaining a record of discussions taking place outside of the Finance and Policy Liaison meeting, particularly for matters of significant risk that may require a high level of transparency, i.e. the London Stadium. Or as a minimum, an update on key matters discussed outside of the Financial and Policy Liaison Group should be raised at their meeting to ensure key discussion points are formally recorded. From what I can understand, the recommendation is saying here is the recommendation is there's an either-or level of transparency, really. And as we know, the Mayor is very keen on transparency. So do we have a choice of which level, or could someone just shed some light on that?
Martin?
Page 61, Martin.
I think that the challenge is that, in a way, you're trying to show that everything significant does get picked up at the main Finance and Policy Liaison meeting, which are agendaed and minuted in detail, and I think I've got to find a way of how do you demonstrate that. You know, like the key. For example, I have monthly meetings with the Chief Executive, Deputy Chief Executive, and the finance team. Anything that's significant comes up, and that we do identify it to be raised at the higher level Finance and Policy Liaison group, where for most parts you've still got you've got the same people. So, and over the last, I would say, 2 years, it's been really good, close working with LLDC, and I, you know, in addition to the formal meetings, I have numerous informal meetings, correspondence, calls, several times a week, and for me is therefore what is feasible, proportionate, to show that we are considering all the significant things. And I haven't got an easy answer for that. We do, you know, like I always take my own note of a meeting.
But I think, you know, with respect, Martin, that isn't quite the point.
But I'm trying to think what it would add, me having my own
I think the
detailed
point,
note.
Yeah, the point that is made in the recommendation, and I mean, I could probably ask for clarification on why we do recommendations and then we don't do them, but it says here, consideration to be given to maintaining a record of discussions taking place outside of the Finance and Policy Liaison meeting, particularly for matters of significant risk that may require a high level of transparency. I don't see, personally, you know, please don't take this wrong way, but I don't see there's an issue with that. You know, if you have a meeting outside of the Finance and Policy Liaison meeting, and clearly there is a matter of significant risk that is raised, or something that is believed to require a high level of transparency, why would you not agree that that's a good idea to take a note of that?
Well, I could agree, but the London staging.
Why can't you then?
Well, because if I can try and explain, is, you know, in a way the simplest thing would be to say I agree with it, but the London staging is a standing item, for example,
yes,
on the finance. And you know, and David Goldstone will have his own record of his informal meetings. I have mine, and we collectively agree what's going to go on the finance and policy liaison meeting. So yes, I could keep a more formal record, and maybe that is what I've been recommended to do, and if so, I will. But this is a theoretical gap, not an actual gap.
No, but there's a risk, isn't there, Martin? And that is that you're saying that these meetings outside of the finance and policy liaison meetings, maybe with David Gold, for instance.
Yeah.
So there's a risk, isn't there, that you don't make a note of something that you think is a risk or is something that needs more transparency, but David Gold does.
Yeah.
And then there's somehow that gets into one of his son's tweets, for example, as a lot of things do, and then you could find yourself somewhat compromised, couldn't you?
I don't see that
about
type
two
of
different people. I think you're talking about the football person. He's talking about the ex-chief exec.
Oh, are you? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
No, but I'll take your point, but it's two different people.
And
Well,
You're thinking
when
about
you
West
talk about
Ham.
London
Yeah.
Stadium,
No, as an example,
I'll take your point.
It suddenly got very interesting.
Yeah. But the principle's the same. There may be something that that another party to that meeting makes a note of something, and then that gets into the public record, but you haven't flagged it up. And I just don't understand. I mean, you probably have got very good reasons, Martin. You should not have take lumps out of Martin Day.
No, I'm happy to go on.
But I'm just thinking of you really, and for your own protection. It surely must be sensible to have relatively not copious but relatively detailed notes of discussions where these matters of significant risk and or high level of transparency occur, so that you are not caught flat-footed.
But these are liaison meetings, they're not decision-making meetings.
No, but that's the point, though, isn't it? Because they're liaison meetings where you have a nice, friendly chat with somebody.
Yeah, so
and then the decisions have to be taken at the finance and policy meeting, I assume.
But that's often the same discussion with a wider group of people. All the decisions are then the formal decisions that will flow. I'm happy to keep a more detailed note of my
Just to finish this, because I'm sure everyone else is nearly as bored as I am with all this. It's down to you, isn't it? At the end of the day, if you keep more accurate records, then you protect yourself, and if you don't, you don't. So it's your choice, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think
the accurate record would be at the finance and policy liaison meeting. That's what I'm saying. Is because
but that isn't the point, though, is it? It's the point of when you are having a friendly chat over a coffee with somebody, and something occurs, a risk flags up, then it's important that is then reported to the finance and liaison meeting, isn't it? That's the whole point.
Well, part of it might be a technical discussion.
Well, we can I've just made the point, and I'm quite happy to leave it there.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay.
I think so. Just say for the record, the critical point is that the formal decision making, is which is done outside both those forums.
Yeah, but that isn't the point. The point is that the finance policy liaison meeting, I believe, is where formal records are kept. Yeah. So if something occurs at another meeting that is a risk, and then that risk isn't recorded in the formal meeting that is minuted,
well, I think
then it's missed.
I'd call it a semi-formal meeting. I mean, my team supports that meeting, and I sometimes go to it. I'd call it a semi-formal meeting. I mean, I don't want to misrepresent what that meeting is. It's a meeting of the key people involved, but it's not a formal decision-making meeting, as Martin said. It's a semi-formal meeting, gathering together the key people. In terms of the formal decisions taken, they're not taken at that meeting.
But no, that isn't the point. That is not the point of where the decision is made. The point is, if something of risk is identified at a lower level meeting, that should be reported to the higher level meeting. Yeah. That's the point. But if you haven't got a note of it, then it's less likely to be reported. And just in conclusion, it's saying here, as a minimum, there should be an update on the key matters discussed. So in these informal coffees or whatever it is you have with whoever you have them with, its recommendation is saying that the key matters that are discussed should be noted, because otherwise you could talk about anything, couldn't you?
Yeah, I think it's just, I'm not really disagreeing, it's just trying to make this to be practical, pragmatic. Because
Sure, I understand.
sometimes you might have a technical discussion. What's the latest update we've had from HMRC sorting out the VAT status of the LLDC?
Yeah.
And if that comes critical, that will then get raised at a finance and policy liaison. But it's not unlike I have meetings across a whole range of subjects with a whole range of people. You know, this is much as me keeping myself informed what's going on. As you know, as you say, I've recognised last time I've highlighted LLDC matters as the highest rated issue on the GLA risk register.
Yeah.
So it also as much as a means of making sure I'm abreast of everything. And so I'm just looking for some pragmatic, practical way that things don't slip through the net, which I think you were saying I'm at risk.
I'm trying to get there, really, I think. And but it is interesting, isn't it, if officers go off and have informal chats, it is interesting to know what they're chatting about, isn't it? And then you can say to them, oh, you had a chat about MHRC VAT. And, what was that then? How'd that go? Whereas, of course, if they don't know you've had the conversation, then you can't ask that very interesting question, can you?
Yeah.
Are we going backwards and forwards a bit?
No, I just...
Yeah, I think we are going backwards and forwards a
Yeah.
bit, yeah. Okay.
I'm finished.
No, but thank you. Tom, did you not have anything to ask?
Follow up. I'll have a response by the follow up.
Yeah. Anyway, that. Can we move on now to the review of material finance systems, creditors, debtors and non-current assets?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This again, as you quite said, review of the material systems, in particular the creditors, debtors and non-current assets. This is part of our key material systems work that we do every year. This received a substantial rating. Again, if you look, although it received substantial, there were two recommendations, priority 3, which have been accepted. One to be implemented by the end of this month and one by the end of April 2018. But hand over to Tom for
Okay.
any questions. But yeah, so
No questions on that?
Sorry,
Great, thank you.
I was like this because we've got a very good chief accountant, not because of me, I hasten to add, for the fullness of the record.
Okay. And then we go to expenses and benefits now.
so it's a
Follow up.
follow-up of the review of employment checks.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, Charmaine's here, but this was following up on the review that was undertaken earlier in the year, where there were 4 recommendations. 3 have been fully implemented, 1 partly implemented, but it's still ongoing because it's looking at the role of the member of staff and their access requirements. So that's something that's, as it's quite what it says, is ongoing. But with those being implemented, we've given that a substantial rating, and as I say, from the previous report, that's a good news story.
I think you had a point on this, didn't you?
Item 6, yeah, is that the where we are on that? That's, now, unfortunately, I can't find the... it's on expenses, that's not, we're not on that.
Sorry.
No,
We're about to come on to that, sorry. We're on 2A in item 5, sorry. The follow-up of employment checks, Chair.
Yeah.
Starts at page 87.
Yeah. No, that's item 6 is my question.
So wait a minute, we're now on expenses.
No,
Sorry,
we're now on the progress report.
Oh, right, okay, right, I see.
If no one has any further questions.
Yeah, no.
You're okay with the follow-up?
Is that,
Yep.
Yes.
thank you.
So, is Charmaine good to go?
Yes, sure, indeed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Great.
So, Chair, I think David, maybe on Appendix 3 to Item 5 will update us on internal audit progress, if that's agreeable to members.
Yep. So yeah, Appendix 3, that gives the work carried out to date. including the reviews already discussed at the meeting today. This also looks at the counter-fraud work undertaken in the third quarter, which are some ongoing reviews which we've previously reported to the panel. Just to state that we've completed 280 days of the 440 days in the audit plan, and we expect to fully complete the audit plan by the end of March 2018.
Okay. Great. Okay, fine. Thank you. No points to make. No.
I can just take you on to Appendix A of that,
Yeah.
which again sets out what we've already discussed in ratings of the reviews today. And Appendix B just gives you an update on the current work programme itself, work in progress, completed, and programme work, again to the end of March 2018.
Okay.
That's everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lou. We're now on to item 6 then.
Can you just note that report?
I'm sorry?
Yes,
we have.
yeah, noted.
We've just done that. Implicitly.
Indeed.
Item 6. Expenses taxable benefits.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is just our regular update, so happy to try my best to answer any questions or respond in writing, but I don't have the answer right now.
Yes, actually, this is in the minutes. I knew I saw it somewhere. I couldn't find it. It's page 17, but it refers to this section anyway, so it's fine. You were very kind to update us on where we were in relation to members' travel cards. It does appear, though, that there is still one travel card receipt outstanding from last year, and whilst there were 3, now there's only 1 still outstanding from this year. I don't know who they are. I don't really need to know who they are necessarily, but it is a bit of a poor show, really, if the authority is spending significant amounts or lending a significant amount of money and receipts aren't provided, and there must be some tax implementation or implication for that as well. So I don't know whether my colleagues agree, but I feel we ought to really say that these people should either present a receipt or return the money or be named and shamed.
I mean, there's no tax implication as such, because we obviously accept the application in good faith with it being members. As I said earlier on before the meeting started, I don't think it's my role to name individuals, whether they're members of staff or elected members in public. I'm more than happy. We tend to chase these people through the heads of office, Robert and Sharon. Because again, it's not our role to sort of go directly. But I'm more than happy to let the members of this panel know in private who they are. I think that's appropriate. I don't think it's my role to put it into public domain.
We're not talking about the same member, are we? We're talking about 2 different members.
Well, we don't know.
I don't think so, but I'll let you know. I've emailed my colleague, and I'll let you. She has the details. I know she does. She told me, but I'll pass it on to you today.
I don't think it's helpful to know that at this moment in time, but there must be, there is a reason why the authority requires a receipt.
Of course.
And if someone's going to give you between £1,500 and £2,500 roughly, you've got a duty to provide the receipt, surely, and there must be some recourse if someone doesn't. Otherwise, then no members do it, and it just makes a mockery of the whole thing.
Well,
And I'd say that whoever, I don't know.
To be fair to members, over many years, the vast majority of people have done this without any discussion. So, and there may be good reasons why certain people haven't done it as promptly as they should. But I'll get back to you via email, and that's what. I don't think it's for me to say any more in public, really.
What actually happens in a situation like, do you actually write to the person who it might be?
I think I think I said earlier, we tend to go through the heads of office for the 2 larger groups.
Okay.
In which case it'll be Robert and Sharon. I think some of the people in Polly's team do that role for some of the smaller groups like your own, Peter. So Rebecca would be blind.
But fair point. Anything, Tom? No? Thank you for that. Anyway, great. Thank you very much. So we note that, subject to that? Yep. Great. Item 7 is the work programme for the audit. This panel coming up. Can we note that? Has anyone got any points to make about that?
Agreed, noted, yeah. Agreed.
I'm aware of you being here, Carl, being quiet and silent there. Have you got any points that you want to make? I mean, I'm not trying to pick on you or anything, but I just wondered if you've come to our meetings.
I could mention it. Yeah. So we have been reappointed as auditors, I'm pleased to know, through the PSAA procurement process. We were successful in that. So we'll look forward to many more years of enjoying these meetings and contributing at the right time.
It's a positive note to end on.
Yes, exactly. Okay, yes, if we can just note the work programme. Thank you very much, Carl, for coming. And we're next scheduled date of next meeting, scheduled for 20th of March, I think, next year. Has anyone got any other business?
I just thought out of courtesy, I think Julie Norgrove did send her apologies.
Yes, she sent her apologies.
Who did, sorry?
Julie Norgrove.
Yes, I noticed.
She sent her apologies.
Right, okay. She wasn't great.
A personal matter meant she couldn't come.
Okay. 20th of March next year, in which case, just remains me to say very happy Christmas.
And to you, Joe.
Thank you.
And see you next year.
Polly has the mince
Polly.
pies.
Okay.
Sherry.
Thank you very much. Great. So,
GLA, Committee Room 4, Sound. GLA